This is the AMD R9 290X. Sort of. This is actually an R9 290, however for the purposes of this video it's been flashed to perform at the speeds of the 290X. I managed to pick one up for $110 along with a 290X water block and backplate from a guy locally using the Danish equivalent of Craigslist, DBA. And although we won't be using the water block for this video, it is nice to have. I always urge people who are on strict budgets to buy PC parts used, especially locally. There are some really good deals out there. Now for the specs. It's got 4GB of GDDR5 on a 512-bit memory bus, 2,816 shader units, 176 texture mapping units, 64 ROPs, 44 compute units. The GPU is clocked at 1000 MHz with the memory clocked at 5000 MHz. For ports, it has 2 DVI, 1 HDMI, and 1 DisplayPort. It's a dual slot card with a TDP of 290 watts, requires an 8-pin and a 6-pin for power. Now let's get into the benchmarks. We're testing 4 games: Overwatch, CSGO, Titanfall 2, and Metro Last Light Redux, at 1080p and at 1440p. Our test bench is a Ryzen 7 2700X at stock, with 16GB of RAM, and the card is also running at stock, mainly because the cooler is super loud, and provided I overclock this, I won't be able to hear anymore. And the tests were about 5 minutes each. The 1% and 0.1% lows might be a little bit overblown because of this, but I was a bit short on time, so take them with a grain of salt. Anyway, benchmarks. Starting off, we have Overwatch at 1080p using the Epic preset. We're hitting an average of 92 FPS with 1% lows of 55 and 0.1% lows of 15, with the 1070 sitting at about 101 average, 1% lows of 76, and 0.1% lows of 8. At 1440p using, again, the Epic preset, we're hitting an average of 64 with 1% lows of 50 and 0.1% lows of 12. With the 1070 getting about 74 FPS average, 1% lows of 49, and 0.1% lows of 8. Again, while the game might be easy to run for most graphics cards, Epic settings are definitely taxing for the GPU, and if you turn down the settings to say high or ultra, which still look really nice, you could pair this card up with a 144Hz monitor and still be good. Now CSGO. At the highest settings, at 1080p, the 290X gets an average of 189 FPS with 1% lows of 76 and 0.1% lows of 36. And the 1070 ended up getting 179 with 1% lows of 89 and 0.1% lows of 28. Which is strange, I know, but I'll get into that later. At 1440p with the exact same settings, we're seeing an average of 174, 1% lows of 97, and 0.1% lows of 36, with the 1070 getting more or less the same. These numbers are weird, and I do believe it's an issue with my game in particular, because I saw the GPU in both cases were being heavily underutilized. But either way, the cards did well and do provide a very playable experience. CSGO isn't that hard to run anyway, and I do think most people who play CSGO just play it at the lowest settings to get the highest FPS possible. Up next is Titanfall 2, a shooter with a very, very good story that I highly recommend you check out. Anyway, here are the results. At 1080p and 1440p with a mixture of high and very high settings using the 4GB VRAM preset to avoid stutter and to be fair to the 290X. At 1080p we're seeing 99 FPS average with 1% lows of 48, 0.1% lows of 22, with a 1070 hitting 134 FPS average with 1% lows of 18 and 0.1% lows of 4. And for 1440p with the exact same settings, I got an average of 78 with 1% lows of 20 and 0.1% lows of 2. And as you can see, the 1070 is quite a bit ahead here. This game runs very well on the 290X. Came out in 2016, so it might not be considered a new AAA title, but it's still demanding for some hardware. Regardless, great results. And last but not least, Metro Last Light Redux, which sees really nice results for an albeit older title, but it's pretty demanding today. With the very high settings and SSAA turned off, at 1080p we're seeing an average of 74, 1% lows of 53, and 0.1% lows of 28, with the 1070 managing about 140 FPS average, 1% lows of 104, and 0.1% lows of 56. At 1440p with the exact same settings, the 290X got 49 FPS average, 1% lows of 24, and 0.1% lows of 23. The 1070 got 86 FPS average, with 1% lows of 50 and 0.1% lows of 37. Metro seems like a very NVIDIA optimized title, but the 290X did really well even in 1440p, which is very nice to see. But of course the 1070 is quite a bit faster in this title. The 290X has seriously impressed me. I was not expecting to get the numbers I got. At $110, I would wager that this card is some of the best value out there for budget 1440p gaming. That said, it's very loud, and I would highly recommend you get your own card with a decent cooler, or if you get a reference model, buy an Arctic Accelero cooler. They're fairly affordable and keep the card much cooler and quieter, and even allow for some really good overclocking. I even found this MSI version for about $110 on eBay, which is about what I paid. However, this is not taking shipping and import taxes into consideration. With 4 gigs of VRAM, the card has plenty of memory for modern day titles at 1080p, as well as 1440p if you lower some settings in games like GTA 5. That game is memory hungry. But alas, thank you for watching my video, and I'll see you next time.